order. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the board just to make sure your mic is pulled down so we can get a good copy of the meeting. Mr. Esposette is absent tonight. Are there any emergency additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay. Then we're going to begin with recognition of swimming. I believe, right? Wrestlers aren't here tonight. Yeah.
So we've got a couple special young ladies we'd like to come forward. Come on up here, girls. I've got this from their coaches. So we've got a couple swimmers I'd like to recognize tonight. Hallie and Josie had fantastic 2019-20 swim seasons. Along with numerous dual meet wins and variety of events, both Hallie and Josie were impressive in championship meets as well. Highlights from Josie's season include TRC champ in 200 IM and 100 fly, sectional champ in the 200 IM and 100 front fly, and state qualifier as a freshman in the 200 IM and 100 fly. Highlights for Hallie's season include TRC champ in the 100 free and 100 back, sectional champ in the 200 free and 100 breast, and third-time state qualifier in the 200 free and 100 breast. If you would please congratulate both of these on the win. These two do quite well in the classroom as well. So,
girls, we'd like to shake your hand if you'd start over here, and we'd love to be able to do that. It's my phone now.
I also told them they'd be welcome to stay, but they told me they both have swim practice, so they're not going to be with us long. They've got to go practice some more. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you for being here. All right. Hearing of the patrons? All right, consent items. Okay, go ahead.
I was making a note because I changed it a little bit. My name is Mary Earl, and this is on the use of the facilities. I once asked the board, when is enough is enough? And as we look at the buildings and future plans, I hope that you have worked in, will we have to paint the walls because an aerogender student is influenced by their surroundings, and a room for the glass gender student because they are sensitive and fragile? When will we reach the point of saying enough to being bullied into thinking gender identity can demand that a whole system conforms for fear of a lawsuit?
So consent items, we normally highlight the donations, but we'll approve these all together. Is there someone who'd like to read the donations? Thank you.
Okay, donations. Donations, $423.09 from the Community Foundation of Wabash County for Tri Kappa Children's Support Endowment. Donation of books from Coles Cares Books via Lobby Lotzenheiser, a retired teacher, many of you probably know. A donation of $100 to the Manchester Junior Senior High School FFA program from an anonymous donor. We have a donation of $100 to the Manchester Junior Senior High School Emergency Lunch Fund from an anonymous donor. Donation of $200 to the Manchester Junior Senior High School Boys Basketball Program for meals from an anonymous donor. I got too much caffeine. Donation of $500 to Manchester Junior Senior High School FFA Program from an anonymous donor. Donation of $10.17 to Manchester Junior Senior High School Squire Team Production Service Film Club from various donors, cash. Donation of $150 to MJSHS Fellowship of Christian Athletes from the First Brethren Church. A donation of $200 from Manchester Junior Senior High School Book Fair for book certificates for 20 students from Wagon. Hope I spelled that or said that correctly. A donation of $364.81 to the Manchester Junior Senior High School Library and Media Center from Manchester Junior High Library and Audio Visual Endowment facilitated by the Community Foundation of Wabash County. And a donation of $100 to the Manchester Junior Senior High School FFA from Jay and Sharon Heckeman. Thank you.
We just don't ever want to take those donations for granted, so thank you. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent items.
So moved.
A motion from Mr. Flack. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second from Mr. Bedke. Any discussion?
I have a couple of questions. Exactly what are we going to use the planning grant? I mean, Dr. Grimaud, can you go into some detail on what that $5,000? Looking to know how we got it and who needs to be recognized for the work, getting the $46,000 grant, and just kind of explain what we're going to use it for.
Ms. Janegi is here, and she can give you all of that information because she's the one that wrote that grant, so perfect.
Those are two different grants. The one for $46,200 is a digital learning and community advisory grant, and that is for professional and curriculum development in the areas of project and inquiry-based learning. Basically, our teachers will get some stipends for writing some curriculum, and it kind of parallels with the DOE's requirements to have some of that kind of training. So that was that grant. The $5,000 grant, we wrote that to explore a high priority in-demand CTE or career pathway. We chose the business entrepreneur kind of STEM focus for that. And we have a meeting in Indianapolis next week that'll give us more information about that. Writing that grant and receiving it allows us or qualifies us to apply for the $50,000 implementation grant. So the $5,000 is purely a planning grant. It's just exploring programs, talking to people to see kind of career pathway options. And then if we would choose to apply for the implementation grant, it's $50,000 the first year and then again the second year. So it's a renewable grant. So it'd be $100,000 for 2 years.
Is there any match with that? Do we have to match it? It's
No.
just
None of those are matching grants.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Keep up the good work.
Other discussion? So there's a motion by Mr. Flack and a second by Mr. Bedke to approve the consent items. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. All right, recommendations for approval. We have a second reading of Policy 3220, the Teacher Appreciation Grant. So since it's a second reading, we're looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve it.
Thank you, Mr. Turflinger. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Mr. Shaw. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. We have Policy 7020, the Chemical Management. Again, a second reading. So we're looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bedke. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. And a second from Mr. Turflinger. Do we have any discussion? Then all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. We'd like to approval for a change of policy number from policy 4010 to 4220, the homeless students enrollment and rights policy.
And I could give you a little bit of background on that. The homeless student enrollment and rights was embedded in the enrollment, and it was really difficult for us to find. So what we want to do is pull it out of that 4010, policy 4010, and make it its own policy. We're not changing any of the wording. All we're doing is changing a policy number, so P4220 then. That's what we'd like to do.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Turflinger. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second for Mr. Flack. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Minutes of executive session from February 11th, 2020. Looking for a motion to approve.
I move approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Bedke. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second from Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 501. Thank you. We're looking for a recommendation for approval of Heather Turflinger for an MIS soccer intramural coach. Looking for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second from Mr. Flack. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 501. Thank you. And finally, we're looking for a recommendation for approval of the cell tower agreement contingent on the site being moved.
Out back here, it's staked off where we had moved it from around the building to out here. They staked off, surveyed it in our facility and finance committee. We had talked about relocating it so that it sits behind this pole barn that's out here. So when you drive in, it kind of sits back behind there, and it's out of that area in that middle of those two grassy fields a little bit. Just to hide it back in there just a little bit and allow that space to still be utilized a little bit better. So that was our recommendation to the AT&T rep. He wants your approval on the contingency plan of that before he'll pay to have his surveyors come out and do that work again. He just wants to make sure that he has board approval for all of that, and we're all on the same page. And then that would essentially allow them to resurvey all of that, give us a new map of where that location would be, and then also update the red-lined contract so that, in hopes that we would both agree to that contract. Right now, the contract would call for a 40 by 40 foot space for that tower for $1,300 a month rent for 25 years. They would bore under the parking lot and not cut up our parking lot to do any running of anything that they would need to do. That would also include a paved back or blacktop drive to that area. So in the winter, we can plow that and it's not gravel and have stones going everywhere. So those were some of the key points that we wanted to bring up, and they didn't feel there would be any issues with that. But we won't make that assumption until we get that updated red line contract, and we obviously won't sign that until we have the new view of where that would be located and we have that red line contract updated. That would also include a $2,500 signing bonus if we did that.
Yearly increase.
Yeah, and that would also be after 5 years, 7.5% escalation in the rent. So when 5 years are up, that would go up 7.5%. 5 more years, 7.5% over the 25 years. So just asking for your approval for that contingency, and then I can let him know, and they would move forward with that.
I'll make the motion for interim approval.
I'll second that.
So there's a motion by Mr. Hensley and a second by Mr. Flack. Do we have any other discussion? Mr. Markham and Dr. Grimeau, are you in favor of this?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. All right, then the next section is discussion and information. We have Dana here from Barton Co. Vilma for the facilities audit update.
I'll do it this way. Ask your forgiveness because I don't have much of a voice tonight, so actually feels fine, so please don't worry. We've prepared an update, as was requested, to the facility study that was done just a couple of years ago. So what I'm going to read and report to you tonight are basically our comments on things that have changed or requests from principals that might be a little different than what was talked about a couple of years ago. So initially in the introduction, we wanted to point out that from the 16-17 school year to current school year, at the elementary, you've had a drop of about 15 students, more or less. These were all rounded numbers, just because it depends what day you count. They'll move that much. We try not to get too detailed there. At the intermediate school, you've had a drop of almost 40 students. While at the high school, you've actually had an increase of about 20. So that's just what your population's done in the last couple of years. Turn this. So first, I'll update on the elementary school. And I won't read through everything. You're going to hear me repeat this at every building. You've not done a lot physically to change the buildings in the last couple of years. I'm sure that comes as no surprise. One of the things that the principal told us, and we interviewed last summer, was that there were some vacant rooms in the elementary at the time, although pre-K was expanding at the time. I think that might have taken up one of them. And she actually had some ideas, rather than relocating the office to an outside wall to get better security at the entrance, of ways to potentially remodel the existing office space by pulling into play the reception and secretaries, the principal, the workroom, and the clinic and the staff lounge. They're all kind of in that area of the office that runs along the commons. By changing the way that's configured, we can get the secretaries clear up to the front corner of the office, and by moving what we call the inside set of doors on the vestibule, the entrance vestibule, further back in the hallway, we can get it to a point that a person can come into the building far enough, still be in the secure zone, and have a secretary be able to actually see them before buzzing them across the hallway into their office. That's a lot less expensive than moving an office to another location, moving classrooms somewhere else. So it was just something that was brought up as a possibility. Beyond that, there were requests to get the carpet out of the commons with all the food and the concern for what grows out of the carpet when things like that happen. Replace that with some type of resilient flooring. Some minor things like the stage sound system and the idea of trying to create for lack of a better term, she called it commons, but a bit of a holding zone for parents when they maybe come to pick up kids or waiting on things, so that they don't just sort of wander around the building. As when we grew up, that was kind of a normal thing to do. Was a request to try and create some more STEM-friendly classrooms. And for those of you who aren't familiar with STEM, what that typically means is it's science, technology, engineering, and math. But what it typically means physically is adding some more plumbing into a space, maybe more power. Oftentimes it's a double-sized classroom, so there's room to move. And just lots of storage, lots of big cabinets to store things in, because there's a lot of manipulatives and things that get used in STEM spaces as kids put things together. Beyond that, a request for better occupational therapy and recess location, because right now they use the stage. And then probably the biggest ticket item is one that was on the list a couple of years ago, which is some added parking, or maybe more importantly, added pavement drive so that we can stack parents when they arrive to pick up kids in the afternoon and they're not out onto the street. Really, those were the big issues at the elementary. I don't know that any of those are probably surprises to anyone, but that's what we heard. Any questions on that issue? If not, I'll jump on to the intermediate school. And quite frankly, the intermediate school, not a lot there at all. Most of the issues that were brought up were issues of routine maintenance that you would expect with the age of various items. You know, the ceiling tile are getting to an age where it's about time to go through and think about replacing them. Several years ago, many of the windows had the panes in them replaced because the insulation, or the insulated panes, the seals had broken. It causes them to fog up because humidity gets in there, makes it look dirty. It's really more of an appearance issue, and it does cost some efficiency and energy, but not significant. More of them have now failed over time, and the idea is probably time to think about maybe going through and replacing some of those again, or getting into a program where you do a few every year. So beyond that, asphalt beginning to break up, just the normal things you expect from living in a building and using it for as many years as you have. Yes, sir.
I don't mean to jump ahead on you, but in every one of these, under indoor lighting, it's mostly 2x4 acrylic, T8. Do you have any idea, I mean, just off the top of your head, what kind of savings we could realize by doing a project to upgrade everything to LED?
It is something we could calculate, but not off the top of my head, no, sir.
Okay.
We do calculate that. We typically see that depending on the mix of lights and classroom space versus public space, how often you burn them, usually the payback range is somewhere from 3 to 7 years in an entire building. Things like parking lots pay back almost immediately. Your larger areas like gyms, they pay back fairly quickly. The longer the lights burn during the course of a day, the quicker the payback.
Thank you.
Unless there are questions on the intermediate, I'll jump to this building. And again, not much has changed here, so we really didn't impact the previous study, other than the roof had kind of advanced in importance, and in fact, you folks had authorized us to prepare drawings. Those are out to bid right now, and next Tuesday we'll be accepting bids for replacement of the roof.
Is this package part of the documentation tonight? Okay.
Any other questions on this building? Then I'll jump to the high school. At the high school, there was a request to look a little more into the development of CTE programs. That's nothing new. It's something I'm sure you folks have talked about. That's an issue all across the state, trying to develop more programs or bring programs back into the high schools that used to be there. Things that lead to certificate programs or potentially less education after school, the ability to go into a trade, or we see things like certified nursing, pharmacy tech, all those kinds of things. And I know all the way down to construction technology and all the things that are involved with that. So there was discussion about how to possibly carve some more of those spaces out of your existing building. And then beyond that, we got asked specifically to look a little bit at the morning drop-off and evening pickup. We had our civil engineer here who observed the evening pickup along with me, and quite honestly, we want to commend you on the process you have in place there. It's about as good as anywhere we've seen, and we really didn't have anything that we could suggest to improve it. Morning drop-off as you come around the building. The only really obvious thing that stood out there was the fact that traffic flows between student parking and the building entrance. However, there's no really simple option to fix that without shortening the space that you have available for drop-off and changing the points where you drop off. And what we witnessed was generally the public, parents who dropped their kids off, were very cognizant of the student pedestrian traffic walking across there, paying attention to that. So unless that changes, it's hard to recommend big investment to change your process and potentially create a different issue. And then finally, we were asked at the high school to observe the lunch periods, because I know you do have the numbers in the building are pretty significant for the size of that cafeteria. Sat through all 3 lunch periods on a day. A lunch, the first one, went through fairly well. Didn't really see much congestion. There was still some spaces in the cafeteria for kids to sit. The big thing we noticed was students tend to carry their books to the cafeteria and they all get piled in the hallway. That's not an issue unless the fire alarm goes off. And then it could potentially become a life safety threat if kids start tripping over books and you got a pile of kids. But that's something that probably could be rectified, finding spaces to put those or ways to get kids to drop them off somewhere along the way. The B lunch, which is primarily the junior high students, was the one that was the most congested in the space, but never did we see a student lacking for a seat during that time. It was the only one where the line actually made it all the way out to the hallway. But even saying that, every student was through the line within 5 minutes. So your food service is doing a really good job of moving kids through. And the junior high kids actually appeared to eat their lunches probably quicker than the high school kids. So they were up and moving out, which allowed new kids to come in and sit down. So it really didn't pose a big problem that we saw. And then C period, or C lunch, was really a repeat of the A lunch. And quite honestly, I'll tell you that the tables you have in that cafeteria are about the least efficient for space and putting kids in there. Before I'd make any major investment in the building, I'd make changes to the furniture where the kids sit and how you seat the kids in the cafeteria. I think it'd be a much better use of your funds and accomplish the same thing. So finally, we know you're in the process of strategic planning, so we've not updated any of the costs yet that we had done previously. I will tell you, though, that over the last couple of years, we've seen prices inflate 30 to 50% depending on what we're doing. So it's been pretty significant, and it's catching people off guard who haven't done anything for a couple of years. With that, I'd also say that we took a look at how your population's trending, and let me make sure I say this right, so I want to find my notes here. So from grades 4 and down, you're on an average of 15 to 20 students less per grade level than grades 5 and up. Now that may not sound like a big deal, but in the very near future, if that continues, you're going to be down 120 to 160 students across your corporation. And that's a pretty significant number when you look at the enrollment in each of your buildings. So you probably, as part of the strategic planning process, want to look at what that means. For most folks, that means, do we consider restructuring how grades are oriented? Do we restructure how buildings are administered? Do we consider consolidation of some buildings and changing the use of others? It's just what people are doing. You're not alone. A lot of folks across the state are dealing with this problem right now, and how you handle it is a matter that's both related to physical issues, but it really related to your ability to fund the programs that you want to fund for your kids. Any questions?
Dana, one question I did have at the elementary, we'd had a water problem there several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I think we addressed it, but for some reason, I thought that was a two-step, and I think there was something at the back of the building we were gonna do later on. Does that ring a bell, or? And the one problem in the front was we had water accumulating out in front. Now, we've been fairly wet, and we come in, tore concrete out, redid some guttering and redid some stuff.
And replaced a lot of the piping under there,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
And then I might be wrong, maybe we went ahead and did the back part, but for some reason in my mind, we were doing to do the two-part, but maybe I'm probably mistaken.
I remember the issue, but I honestly don't remember how far we went in resolving it. I'd
Okay.
really have to go back and
Okay.
pull out notes and drawings, but I do remember the issue, thank you.
I know we've had some wet weather that really become a problem in the wintertime when it froze, is when we had the real issue, because it would freeze out in the front where the students would walk. But then I think we, like you said, we tore all that up, repiped it. For some reason, I thought we had to do something to the back with tile running down to that creek at the back.
Mr. Self just mentioned, he seemed to recall at the time there was an issue with some trees and shading that was
Okay.
preventing things from drying out.
Okay. Okay.
But I can pull that back out and do some research on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
What, was there conversation on the transfer students between the buildings then, in this climate study?
Between other corporations and yours,
No, between this building and that building, one of our biggest issues with these kids. Did you guys talk about that in this climate study, or?
we did not talk about that being an issue because that's more of a safety and security issue. I don't know that it's posed a great deal, and Mr. Lippy's here. I don't know that it's posed a great problem for you from the educational perspective. You've really you seem to have isolated the times that the students move back and forth to really minimize that and taking that into account with your schedule.
And I would just say, we put several things in place this year to make sure, the safety. We have somebody stationed out there at all time, if not 2 people. And that's been happening every time I've been out there. We also eliminated the drop-off at the high school for the junior high kids to sign in and then have to walk over by themselves. They now are dropped off here in this office. We do all the sign in, the intake. Parents will bring them things. Missy's been great about working with parents on that. So we've eliminated that piece. There's a lot of things that we have put in place just to make sure that the kids are safe walking.
So is that gonna be part of the strategic plan?
That's up to you.
Because if I remember a year ago, I think that, wasn't that in this? Maybe my memory's failing me, huh? But
No, I believe it was in there. When I first came in June, I remember hearing about the walkway or something, but.
Yeah, what, minimize is one thing, hopefully we're shooting to eliminate it, so as much as possible, but other than that.
And it's not
Thank you.
added as comments this time because it was in the original study. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you, Dana. Heartland update, Mr. Turflinger?
As you all know, I mentioned last month, Mr. Stryker went to Indianapolis and picked up an award from the state for the law enforcement curriculum class that they offer at Heartland. And he's kind of expanded on that. He went and got certified in 911 dispatch certification in Fort Wayne, and now that will be added to what's already an award-winning law enforcement curriculum down there. And this certification is on the approved list from the DWD, but I don't know what that is. And it counts towards the Indiana pathways for graduation. I'm sorry, did you?
Department of Workforce Development.
There you go, Department of Workforce Development, thank you. We have committed, the Heartland Career Center has commitments right now of $210,000 worth of, towards the $5 million grant. We have to come up with the $1 million to get the $4 million for the new Precision Machining Center. And the Community Foundation of Wabash County, Commissioners, Grow Wabash County, and the Ford Meter Box have all made commitments. And right now we're sitting at 210,000, and there's several others that were commitments that are being considered for this federal grant. It'll be a 2 or 3 month waiting process on that federal grant. The CDL classroom, the class portion started last week, and the students will be taking their test to receive their driver's permit in the coming days. And planning is now taking place for the Career Expo on April 28th for 9th grade students, and that will take place at the Wabash County YMCA. It will include 9th graders from Wabash, Northfield, Southwood, Manchester, North Miami, Peru, and Oak Hill high schools.
Thank you. Mr. Hensley, do you have a legislative update?
Sure, so there's a lot of hubbub over HB 1065 because basically the legislation put in some modification language that basically said if the community does like referendum, or if the community school does referendum, then it has to be, some of that money has to be open. Well, it was real loose. I think the way this ended up was you have to, if you're gonna do a referendum and some of the money's going to a charter school, I think you have to state that in a referendum now. So I think that was kind of the big thing. They did, I saw the workforce cabinet, so they put, makes changes to membership of governor workforce cabinet. So they have to have, they're adding an early learning deal basically that would make Amy happy, I think. So this whole early learning push with the children, which is a good thing. So they did some things there. Accountability, you can talk about that some, with the school accountability. And I think they did, mental health services legislation where we've got to designate, a mental health professional that the school system's working with, and I think we already designated to someone in the area or something like that. And then something good was employment of minors, good or bad, how you look at this, but they're going to increase the hours basically for minors to work, which helps. That's been kind of a stickling point on the internships, and some of these kids going into business is real bad because the 18 limit, the hours that they got to work, whether I think 17 to 18 can now work 40 hours, which is quite a bit, right? So I think everybody has to be a little, attentive to that part, but I think that opens up a lot more interaction between our students and the business community as far as that goes. So that's some of the highlights. Basically, I'll leave this here if anyone wants to read it. So a lot of activity. So.
Thank you. All right, then we have a first reading for policy 5230, Title I, parent involvement, and the administrative guidelines.
Right, and the parent involvement plan is required by the federal government, so we have to put that plan in place. And we actually included administrative guidelines in there as guides for our principals and our teachers and those involved in that process, that they need to be able to collaborate together for the betterment of the students. So essentially that's what this is about. Any questions?
Is this part of the requirement for 5090, the Hatch Amendment, No Child Left Behind, where parents have the right to, or is this something separate?
It's separate,
Okay.
yeah.
And you said this does largely affect MES, right? That's That's where we're
Right now,
spending all these
MES
monies,
is the
so-
one that has our Title I funds. We just had a discussion today, didn't we? So,
Mr. Hensley, do you have anything to add from the
No.
policy committee? You're good as is?
Yep.
Policy 3230 is the suicide awareness and prevention, and this is, again, a first reading.
This is also a required policy from the state, and our counselors were wonderful at working together, and they took the ISBA recommended policy and tweaked it a little bit, and that's what this one is all about, is what we're going to do and what our process will be if we have some students that are thinking about self-harm. Any questions on that?
Is there more of it?
Yeah, there should be. They just haven't scrolled down. I think it's 2 pages. 5 pages? I don't know why I had 2. They were hard at work. Right, Ben?
Any discussion or questions?
Well, I just think that this is, I mean, we need to couple this with resource, right? So, and you're working on that, so.
With resources for social emotional. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, we're in the process of writing a grant for that. Hopefully we'll get it.
All right, then these will be brought back next month as items for approval. And patron comments? All right, superintendent comments?
I apologize, there was a whole list back there, and I didn't want to just jump up first. I do want to compliment this social media is so much better. The policy and the website is improved so greatly. I really thank you for that. I said a little bit before about enough is enough. One of my biggest problems is when I start investigating one area, it leads to another and another and another. And my main concern now is that if we, and that's we as a community, parents, and school system, will say no to the move sweeping this country about comprehensive sex education. This is now in neighboring states and in some Indiana schools. If this becomes law here, will our school have the guts to stand up and say no? Or will our teachers be telling K-3 children that touching parts of their bodies will make them feel good? Will our 10-year-old girls be having condom races to see who can put a condom on the penis the fastest? Will older girls be picking a boy and then putting a condom on his fingers? Will our high school kids be informed to how to have treatments and procedures without parental permission? Will we have sex education included in math, English, and other classes to make it impossible for parents to opt their children out? These are all in the curriculum supported by the National Education Association and Planned Parenthood. Sex education has a place in our academics. Students need to be taught about puberty, abstinence, and birth control. They need to know about sexually transmitted diseases. They need to know about date rape and date drugs. But children in K-3 should not be receiving information on vaginal intercourse or seeing graphic pictures of various sexual positions. Children should not be taught abortions can be arranged without their parents' knowledge. And comprehensive sex education is sexualizing our children, and it begins in kindergarten. When will we stand together to fight for our children to receive the best academic education possible, to encourage our students to investigate, reason, and form their own opinions, to work with the students to help them understand that social behavior has consequences, where good behavior is rewarded and bad behavior is not, and to protect the rights of the parents? Or will this school, families, and community fall into line and walk the path towards the now popular goal of a common philosophy? And anybody wants a copy, there's a copy of that and all the websites.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Will you just remember to state your name just for the record and then
Good evening.
Short
I'm
comments.
Chris Metzger. Thanks for allowing me to get up here again. This is not my most comfortable spot, but I'm feeling like this is something that is laid on me to do. Since the whole bathroom thing had been brought to light to parents back last fall, I found the practice to be put into place deceptively. So when I discern something in a deceptive nature, I tend to start investigating. So my research led me to look into organizations that are deeply connected to the educational system. So I went and investigated the National Education Association, the National School Board Association, the Association of School Counselors, American School Counselor Association, and also the National Association of School Psychologists. And that isn't all I investigated because, like Mary said, once you start diving in, you get on so many trails. And so trying to just draw it in to more detailed research, you soon find that the organizations that you will be guided by are specifically guiding you to ask your students, let alone your teachers, to start affirming gender identity students in the means in which they identify. In this process, I've also come to learn about not just comprehensive sex education, but also social emotional learning programming. Through that programming, it becomes increasingly difficult for parents to make the decision to opt their children out of specific teachings. Through social emotional learning, you start developing an environment. I get that there are kids that are struggling emotionally and socially. I get there are problems at home that overpower some students as they come into the academic area at school. I understand. I'm an early child educator. I understand the importance of mental health in students and how it affects education. But I also am a parent and now a grandparent of kids that could be in the school system. And my concern is as you move forward with social emotional learning, is that you soon start stripping away the values, the morals, and the beliefs that parents are trying to instill in their children, because through this programming, you start expecting conformity from everybody involved to the values that you decide as education system is what these children should be adhering to. So my concern is moving forward is how do you protect your teachers now who have a faith that says, I don't agree with this, because when you, like myself being a Christian, I'm going, the Bible teaches me to not conform to this world, to be transformed in my mind through Christ. So when you've got students from this background and you have teachers and staff people from this background, how do you move forward protecting them with their faith intact? How does that happen? And when you move with the social emotional learning programming, how then are parents going to be able to say, this is a program that I'm not real comfortable with, I don't like how it infringes on my rights in raising up my children, I want my children to have the best education they have, but I see this as a conflict. So how do we make this come together? How do you learn to move forward and say, this child is confused, we get that. We still love this child. How can we help this child without making everybody else bend to that ideology? So that's my concern for you moving forward. And how does that impact the mental health on the rest of the students that you're now saying, well, you have to accept this. You can't call this person by their biological sex, especially a student that has been involved with this student already pre this decision, and now you're asking a young person especially to try to grasp what their mind can't even wrap around. And the question that I have too is the grants that you were discussing, where is that grant money coming from? What association? Can you tell me where those grants the money is from? Yeah, the ones that you discussed earlier. All of them are IDOE. Okay, and we don't know beyond the Indiana Department of Education where specifically that money comes from, because what I'm learning is there are organizations feeding money to get these ideologies and all these practices within the education system to start working on the minds of our kids, and it's messing people up. And we're going to be held responsible for that. If you move forward expecting conformity out of all of these students and these teachers, because I'm sure there are teachers holding their tongues out of fear of their job. I'm sure there are. And I just want you to acknowledge this moving forward. This is a sensitive issue. But as you move forward, totally implementing ideology in all aspects of your curriculum, you no longer give parents the right to choose what it is they want their kids to be involved in. And constitutionally, you've got to be aware of that right for these parents. And I know this is a public education school, but there's still a line. There's still a line where the school is not responsible for the values and belief system of the student. The parents are responsible for the values and belief system of the student. I get that you want the kids to know how to be kind to each other. We all want that. But there has to be a way of allowing parents and the values that they want to have instilled in their children to still be a part of that child or even that teacher. There still has to be a way for them to maintain who they are without giving up their faith in who they are to accommodate the ideology of other people. So we have to be careful with that as we move forward. So thanks.
We're just going to ask that comments stayed at 3 minutes, as is typical to our board meetings.
Jake Longnecker. I got several different things here. There's been a lot of discussion about 10th grade video that's been circulating about suicide prevention. Problem is, there's some things in that video that are actually against the state statutes. So you guys, by showing this video, we're promoting underage sex. You guys realize that? Anybody check that? Anybody look at it? Check the statute? I'm going to assume no. It's against state law. Check it out. Other things. It's been discussed that those that are identified as a different gender, because of fear of usage of bathrooms, are going through and holding it. Okay, we go to a gender neutral bathroom situation. Think girls are not going to be holding it, or boys, or anybody, with their someone from a different sex sitting beside them? I'm going to say different sex because I don't really care. I'm not politically correct. You got girls' bathrooms that have special places for special items that need to be disposed of. Think that's not going to create problems? You're going to have all kinds of problems. You're going to have other people that are going to be holding their bowel movements the entire day because they don't want to have to deal with this. So let's satisfy the 2% and make sure 98% are the ones that are dealing with this. It's also been said before, let's see, do we need to check our faith at the door? If we're going to ask people to check their faith at the door, are we also going to ask others to check their ideologies at the door? It's only fair. And it's already hard enough to fill teaching positions without having to try to put teachers in the middle of stuff that they were never meant to be put in the middle of. It's also worth noting, the same groups that are pushing these gender movements are also the ones that are also putting down dollars to try to normalize pedophilia. Think I'm wrong? Look it up. There's also been discussions of people that are discussing their ideologies during school lunches without parental consent. Teachers. Is that allowed? And that's actually a question, is that allowed? Can anybody answer that?
I don't think we're answering questions right now because this is hearing of patrons.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to take that as that you guys don't know that answer. So, might want to start looking into what your teachers are doing out on your grounds, because it's happening. So if you're going to tell somebody that you're not allowed to talk to my child about faith, but you're going to allow other employees to talk about their ideologies without parental consent, you're possibly looking at another lawsuit. Are you going to conform to that one? Are we going to conform to every single lawsuit that comes? I don't know.
You are at your 3 minutes, so try to wrap it up. Thank you.
My name is Haley Hand. I learned this week that an 18-year-old in Wisconsin was arrested for sexual assault for showing his genitalia to fellow classmates in a gender-neutral bathroom facility. Has that changed with this information? Would the school board be willing to change their position on trying to implement a gender-neutral facility for the safety of all students in this school system?
Superintendent comments?
I just want to talk a little bit about the facility audit that was just mentioned earlier, that this audit will be discussed in a little bit further length after we hear the initial presentation of the educational aspects of the strategic plan, which will be happening during the work session on April 30th at 5 o'clock, so if you're interested in coming. We won't be doing a lot of work on the plan. We're just listening to each. Did I say the wrong thing?
March 30th.
Oh, you're right, March. I don't know why I have April. Thank you. We'll just be the beginning stages of the strategic plan, and we'll get a lot of input from the community on that as well. But that input will not probably happen too much on that March 30th date. We're just here to listen to hear what the schools are sharing with us. Coronavirus, I know that many of you are interested in what we are doing, and we did send out a letter last week. Please know that today we had a team of district administrators, our nurse, our safety specialists, that we got together and we developed a detailed plan. At this point, we are waiting for any message from the Indiana Department of Education and our healthcare officials. Until then, we actually have to wait on their guidance, so please know that when we do get that, we will let you know ASAP, and we do have that plan in place. We've been extra vigilant so far about our cleaning practices. We've actually gone above and beyond trying to prepare for this, so just know that the students and staff's safety is paramount, and we want to make sure that we do everything possible to ensure that appropriate safeguards are in place. But stay tuned. I'm sure, as you've heard, Purdue is closed, IU is closed. A lot of things are happening at a very rapid pace. So just stay tuned. We will put everything out on social media, between social media, our school messenger system, if anything should happen and we would get any advice from those. But at this point, we have not heard of anybody in our school system that is working or has any issues with that virus of what we have known. So that's all I have to share. So thank you.
Dr. Grimmel, point of order. If I read this right, on the 30th, we're going to approve this contract?
Yes, we have to have a special session
Okay,
just
so
to do
that'll have
that.
to be a special meeting,
Yes,
not a work
yes,
session?
we know, yes. Then we'll go into the work session, so we'll have to, back to back.
Okay. In response to the public comments, everyone has a right to know what your children are being taught. If you look up on the website, I believe the number is 5090 is the Hatch Amendment, No Child Left Behind. You have the right to view what your child is being taught. And if you can't find it on the website, we've got some professionals right here that can help you.
Other school board comments?
I have a question maybe Sue can help us with. So if there's how is curriculum adopted into Manchester Community Schools? If something new comes out, I mean, do you review it? Does the teachers, do the administrators, how does that get adopted? What's the policy?
A little bit of all of that as far as who looks at it. Right now, there's not a lot of mandates for curriculum.
Hey, Sue, I'm sorry, you're gonna need the mic, I know.
Right now, as far as curriculum goes, we have academic standards, and we create our curriculum around those. There haven't been mandates for particular things that we have to teach. I mean, there are loose guidelines for suicide prevention, those kinds of things, but no one, to my knowledge anyway, has said this is a mandatory curriculum that your district has to teach. That's not how the state of Indiana operates. Does that?
So unless the state changes, if the comprehensive sex education, you and the board or whomever would have the ability not to have that in our school system?
From what I understand, yes. If you look on the DOE's website, abstinence is the first thing that they talk about under sex education.
Okay. How about the social and emotional learning? I mean, that's not necessarily a curriculum.
It's not really curriculum. I mean, there's some mental health things. Again, I have not seen anything mandated in those areas. There are a lot of supports when they talk about social, emotional learning and health, and they're putting a lot of funding in that. But I have not seen any funding that says you have to use X, Y, and Z curriculum in that. The districts have a lot of flexibility, I think, in that.
Yeah, I would agree that we have the autonomy to be able to do what we feel like we need to do for our students.
Right now it's under local control, if that helps to kind of paint the picture. It's not under state control.
And if the state came in and mandated something and we said no, and we just say no, then what's the consequence of that?
It depends on what it is, I suppose. I mean, they talk about being in and out of compliance, and they would probably just label us as out of compliance. Maybe we would risk losing some funding, but I mean, it's hard to know. We're not in that situation, so I don't know. I mean, again, local control right now.
Thank you.
And we did discuss in policy, especially like videos and stuff like that, maybe not censoring, as some of the discussion was in the email, but you put some, some basement criterion that we don't show some of this stuff, and I'm in agreement with that. So, I mean, if it's in our control, then we control that through policy. So, back to that discussion, next policy meeting, maybe that, there need, not to censor, but some type of filter on sex, drug use. I mean, some of this stuff, I just don't think it has a place in a school. So, I mean, I know that touches that. The mental health, when I say mental health, I'm not talking about teaching your kids different things opposite of a parent. I'm freaking talking about giving these kids that are hurting help so they don't hurt themselves or hurt someone else, and we stink at it as a country, right? That's why we're in the shit. That's why we need to build a $50 million jail, right? Because people are in jail because we don't address mental health. So none of this has got anything to do with with going against the parents' will in our schools. You know, and it's a touchy subject. I appreciate every one of your comments, you know, because there's, you know, I do my own little research, right? And there are avenues and outfits out there that you got to look out for. But I don't think anyone on this board's, we're not here to teach, you know, to tell kids anything against their parents and to teach them anything. And mental health's really, you know, the social and emotional, is I do this little life coaching with these kids down at Heartland. And I just see, you know, their confidence, how they address people in public, whether they look the person in the eye, they shake their hand, right? Different things with these kids that you know, maybe it isn't a school's place, but by golly, a lot of them don't have two parents at home, and the one they have is working. So whatever we can do on that aspect of social emotional and teaching these kids life skills, I think we're remiss if we don't do something like that, you know. But so, and my last statement's going to be this: never did I say check your faith at the door. Let's just get that straight right now. I didn't use that word. I said feelings, okay? So I don't like, you know.
It's been applied throughout the community.
Okay, yeah, I bet it has. Fake book, you know. It sure has, hasn't it? You know, I never said that. And when I said about feelings, is you got people out here that'll go down the road, right, and they get into an argument over something, and then one of them ends up shooting themselves. So when I say, you know, it's what I do for a living, and when I say that, I mean to control your feelings where it doesn't make you do irrational decisions and that. So I just want to kind of clarify what I said last meeting, just to make sure everybody's clear on that. So, and I do appreciate all the comments from the public. I appreciate everybody being here tonight too. It's kind of nice to not see those chairs empty. Unfortunately, you know, the stuff that comes up that you guys are here, you know, but it's still good to kind of see the community involved. So, thank you.
Dana, do you have an idea when we sent the facilities committee back and we had other stuff when you left? Do you have an idea when the last revisions of the project, bathroom project, do you have any idea when those cost numbers will be available? Would they be available on the 30th, or you need more time?
We've not evaluated that. Sorry.
That's all right.
We will try.
I was just trying to save you a trip since you're going to be here on the contract anyways.
Other board comments? Then we're adjourned. Thank you.